Mr. President, I was just checking the congressional record. You see, we have a tradition here in the Senate. The tradition is that what we say on the floor is printed and available the next day right at our desk. It's kind of an amazing thing. It goes back to the congressional record being the record of the proceedings of this body, and timely printing of it was part of the history. And I wanted to check and see, based on the statements made by my friend and colleague, the senator from Wyoming, whether the congressional record printed yesterday the efforts of Democratic Senator Ben Lujan of New Mexico to fund the SNAP program. Here it is. The page number is S7808 for the beginning of the debate by Senator Lujan, who came to the floor and wanted to make sure that we wouldn't have any gaps in coverage when it came to the SNAP or food stamp plan across America. You see, the reason he did it was that 42 million Americans, 1 out of 8 people in our population, need help putting food on the table. And so the SNAP program doesn't sound extremely generous. It's $6 a day. Imagine if you had to feed yourself with that amount of money each day, the sacrifices you would make. So Senator Lujan came to the floor. Why was he taking on this responsibility? It's because he is the chairman, or the ranking member now, of the subcommittee that funds the SNAP program. And he came to the floor to make sure that there would be no gaps in coverage and people would still get their paychecks starting November 1st. I call them paychecks, but they're basically SNAP checks or credit for purchases at the store. And you know what happened when he came to the floor? There was an objection. The objection came from the Republican leader of the Senate. The Republican leader of the Senate yesterday on the floor, page S7808 and 809 you can find in the congressional record, was asked if he would approve Senator Lujan's effort to protect all the SNAP recipients across the United States, and he said no, he objected. Now, he wanted us to pass another bill, but he had a chance with Senator Lujan's request to make sure that there would be no suffering of anybody across America because of the SNAP program. And on page S7808, Senator Thune said no. And now we have the argument that was made by the senator from Wyoming that one of the reasons that cannot be done is it's illegal. Now that's a real hoot, to use a technical term, as far as I'm concerned. So the senator from Wyoming has said it would be illegal in a government shutdown to feed 16 million kids, 8 million seniors, and 4 million people on disabilities during the shutdown. Well, the last record shutdown under President Trump in his first term went for 35 days, and he kept the SNAP program going. Was he doing it illegally, I asked the senator from Wyoming? I think not. In fact, the Trump administration on their own website acknowledged that they were going to make this payment under the SNAP plan even with the government shut down. They did that on their website, and we have copies of it. And guess what happened to that assertion on their website? It disappeared. Just a few days ago, it disappeared. So a program they used under Trump's first administration, a program that they said they could follow again under this second Trump administration and second Trump shutdown, disappeared magically from the website. So across America, some 42 million people, 12% of our population, will not be able to put food on the table because of a decision by the Trump administration not to feed Americans. Of all the priorities, wouldn't you think that keeping our population, the poorest among us, the neediest among us, with food on the table would be the highest priority? Don't you think they could come up with the money for it? Well, it seems like the president can come up with money for Argentina when he said Argentina was in a terrible economic situation, and he was going to send $20 billion of American tax dollars to Argentina. That was a week or two ago. And then find $20 billion in the private sector to also go to Argentina. There was plenty of money for Argentina, but not enough money to pay for SNAP program. How can that be? And yet it is the reality. We have 2 million recipients of SNAP in my home state of Illinois, and we know we can take care of them. The Trump administration is making the choice. They have the resources, they have the authority, they just don't have the political will to take care of the problem. I was on a radio call-in show in Bloomington, Illinois this morning, and we talked about the SNAP program. A lot of people really depend on it. A third of the recipients are kids, another third are disabled, and a third are seniors. They're needy people. Long before the government shutdown, Congress sent U.S. Department of Agriculture funds for this purpose. U.S. Department of Agriculture used these funds, as I mentioned, in Trump's first showdown, his first decision to not fund the government. In fact, a month ago, as I mentioned, the U.S. Department of Agriculture's shutdown plan said this is exactly what they'd do. They'd pay the SNAP benefits. And then when it became public that they'd made that claim, that vanished from their website just a matter of a few days ago. Why? During this shutdown, the Trump administration did have the money for Argentina. The president seems to be able to find money for things that are important to him. Obviously, SNAP and the benefits are not important to the president. Well, I have news for the president. Because of his decision on the SNAP plan, millions of Americans are going to have to struggle to feed their families. Americans paying a price for this decision by the president. I recently heard from one of them, Michelle from Hodgkins, Illinois. She had a message that goes beyond her letter to me, her email to me, and it really is a message for all Americans. Here's what she said. You're forgetting about the seniors that are age 60 to 65. I already cut down my meals to 2 a day. I really don't want to try to live on 1 meal. I take medicine and I need to eat. My size shows that I have not been eating. I know for a fact many eat cereal for dinner. It's filling and cheap. That's the plight facing poor people if the SNAP program is in fact shut down by President Trump. Here's another message from Martin in Macomb. I'm on SNAP due to a disability, epilepsy as well as some others. I rely on SNAP as well as Social Security and disability payments to survive. Martin of Macomb, Illinois went on to say, most of the people in my building rely on SNAP to pay for food. I'm worried about how I'll be able to afford food on November 1st. And sadly, there are millions of other individuals who will suffer in silence because they receive this assistance, but basically are concerned about the stigma that might be attached to them if they say anything publicly. Meanwhile, for the past 6 weeks, Republican members of the House of Representatives have been gone. I'm not sure what they're doing. I hope they're home at least tending to their constituents, but they should be in Washington. If we would have passed Ben Ray Lujan's Democratic senator's proposal yesterday to fund the SNAP program, we would have needed action by the House of Representatives. But it's not here, and it hasn't been here for 6 weeks. 6 weeks. We need him, and we need the president when he comes home from his trip overseas to make this a high priority. The House has not held a vote since September the 19th. President Trump is tearing down part of the White House to build a new, lavish $300 million ballroom. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem found $200 million during the shutdown to buy 2 luxury Gulfstream jets for her and her top staff. The Trump administration sees those efforts as priorities, but it will not send our most vulnerable American citizens $6 a day to afford to eat. I suppose nobody should be surprised that's where we are. Under the president's leadership this summer, the Republican-led Congress passed their so-called Big Beautiful Bill, which made the biggest SNAP cuts in history. So the program that they are now refusing to fund at all was reduced dramatically to make it more difficult to pay out those payments, food stamp type payments to SNAP recipients under the Big Beautiful Bill, which I'll refer to again in a moment. They made the biggest cuts in the history of the SNAP and food stamp program, cutting the program by 20%, and now they're lamenting on the floor that they just can't pay anything at all. It's illegal for them to pay anything at all. We know that's not true. President Trump has decided we can't wait any longer. He wants to stop SNAP funding on Saturday and hurt 42 million Americans to teach the Democrats a lesson. Another example of cruelty to people who are vulnerable by this administration. I appreciate the leadership of Ben Lujan, my Senate colleague from New Mexico. He really believes this in his heart of heart. And if the congressional record, which I referred to earlier in my statement, can be referenced, you can hear or read the words of Senator Lujan, which were touching because he does care, not just in New Mexico, but across America, what this is going to do. I hope my Republican colleagues will allow us the opportunity to vote on Senator Lujan's bill today, before we leave. Let's make sure that there's no gap in the program. And let's put away this argument that was just heard on the floor that somehow it's illegal to feed people. This week, the Secretary of Agriculture appeared on CBS News to defend her agency's refusal to fund SNAP. Here's what she said. Look at the president's record at standing behind the ag community and rural communities. No one's done more than President Trump has done to date for these communities in her lifetime. Well, after abandoning vulnerable families receiving SNAP and helping South American farmers over U.S. farmers, President Trump and his U.S. Department of Agriculture has certainly had an unprecedented effect on American communities, but not for the reasons she thinks. The bottom line as well is that it's bad news for people who may not be receiving SNAP but are struggling to make payments for hospitalization insurance. The cost of living continues to go up under the Trump administration. And the issue which we are trying to drive home to our friends on the other side of the aisle should be a bipartisan concern of what's happening to health insurance premiums across America. Take a look. If you're on the Affordable Care Act plan, you're going to see a dramatic increase. In Illinois and the city of Chicago, people who are under that plan, thousands of them, are going to see their health insurance premiums double, at a time when they're struggling to make grocery payments and electric utility payments. They're going to double. Why? Because the big, beautiful bill, the budget bill of President Trump, passed by all Republican votes, no Democratic votes, unfortunately, has eliminated the tax credits that are available to people in middle-income categories. Who are these people, these faceless people? We'll put a face on them. 1 out of every 4 farmers, 1 out of every 4 farm families in our country use the Affordable Care Act. A half of the people who own small businesses use it. They're the ones who are facing these heightened premiums. What we are doing is begging the Republicans to correct the mistake they made in the big, beautiful bill. Come forward with sensitivity, not just to those receiving SNAP and food stamps, but to the families that are struggling to make health insurance payments. These families need help. The cost of living goes up for them every single day, and this is going to be a hardship many of them can't endure. Millions, literally millions of Americans will lose their health insurance because of the big, beautiful bill. We have a chance to correct it, and we should do it as soon as possible. It's time to sit down at the table as soon as the president gets over his jet lag and comes home, to sit down at the table immediately. The Republican leaders have got to come back to Washington from the House, and the Republican leaders in the Senate, as well as Democratic leaders on both sides. They're the only ones that can solve this. I've been in Congress for a number of years. I think I've seen every major shutdown, and I've seen how they all end. There will be some triggering device that does it. I hope that whatever it takes, we get it done and done quickly. I yield the floor.